Hi, this is Sergeant Bisa Larson. Use of force report writing number 4. Inmate had a weapon taped to his hand, high on meth and bath salt. That's the prefix. Now we've talked about this. This would be the 4th one. The other 3 I've kind of painted a picture, and I keep repeating some things over and over, teaching how to build the big picture in a court. So today on this one, I'm going to talk as the report was wrote and paint that picture for you without adding to it. So if you haven't seen the first 3 parts, you need to watch those, and get familiar with what I'm saying in this pattern. So here we go. I've already told you. On May 1st, 2019, 2300 hours, officers in Y building, a general population dorm, called and said one inmate refused to lock down and had ran out of the dorm pod into the lobby area. He was secure in between 2 doors in the lobby. I, Sergeant Larson, and 2 other officers, John, Officer Jim, called on the radio that we were responding. The shift lieutenant, OIC, John Doe, also radioed to Central. He was responding. As I arrive on scene, I see in the lobby, in between 2 secure doors, 2 officers and an inmate. The inmate so-and-so, GDC number so-and-so, I observed he had a mop handle in his hand, twirling it like a martial artist. I gave instructions to the inmate to put it down. The inmate put it down. I instructed him turn, face the wall, put his hands on the wall as far as he could reach, spread his feet. I observed the inmate had multiple layers of pants and sweatshirts and still had the winter jacket that we had already collected the month before. I observed he was heavily clothed, very agitated, very antsy, couldn't stand still. I instructed inmate so-and-so, do not move as we open the door and I enter. The control booth officer buzzed the door. I anticipated he would charge the door, so I had my foot in front of the door. When the door buzzed, he charged the door. I shut the door immediately, gave him further instructions. Once again, he turned, faced the wall, put his hands on the wall, palms facing the wall, feet spread apart. At this point, I knew from my experience as a retired police officer that he was high on some kind of drug. I knew that the multiple layers of clothing he had was to prevent us from using a taser or the chemical agents. I knew going in the plan, the 3 of us would have to be hands-on to take control if he did not lay on the ground. I instructed the inmate to lay on the ground, flat on the ground, spread his hands, spread his feet. The inmate refused. The door buzzed and opened. Now, I didn't give this instruction. The control booth officer pushed that buzzer. Since the door opened, I entered. The 2 officers, we grabbed one on each arm. I grabbed his left arm. Another officer grabbed his right arm. Immediately, I heard the other officer, one of the 2 in there, say he's got a weapon. I had his left wrist pushed on his back, spun, had him face first against this wall. He said, I can't get the weapon from his hand. With my left hand on the inmate's left wrist, I started short, deliberate jabs to the side of the neck, jaw area. I'm showing you this on video. This is where I started. I told the inmate, drop the weapon. I will not stop hitting you until you drop the weapon. Inmate said, no. F you. You know what the F you means. I continued to strike. His hand pulled. It came behind his back. I was trying to help the other officer get one handcuff on while the 3rd officer was attempting to remove the weapon from his hand. We tried to keep him against the wall. I continued to strike the inmate in the side of the neck, brachial stun area, and the jaw. I knew from previous experience and training that his drug intoxicated level, I would have to disrupt his central nervous system. I continued to strike. I saw his left hand come free with a handcuff on it. Now I know he has two weapons. He still has a weapon tied to his hand, his right hand, tied duct tape to his hand, and with a free swinging handcuff, that loop becomes a second weapon. I grabbed his left wrist, went straight to an armbar takedown, put him on the ground face down, began to bring his left hand with my left hand around to the back in a hammerlock position, trying to secure the cuffs. The inmate refused, was trying to pull his left hand under his body. He was struggling to give both hands back to us. I continued to strike the side of his face, head and neck area, trying to disrupt his thought process, his central nervous system. I continued to strike until we did eventually get the weapon free from his right hand, and we were able to get both hands through this distraction technique of me striking with my fist. We got both hands secure. I told the officers, he's secure. We've got the weapon away. The cuffs are no longer a weapon. We need to sit him up, roll him over, and get him standing up, if possible, at least sitting up in a good position, upright position. We need to make sure his jacket becomes open as best we can, open the two outer doors and get airflow to come through. I did that, and this is how I'm writing this report. I did that to get ventilation because I knew from dealing and fighting with prisoners as a police officer, with inmates that are very high on drugs, his heart is racing, his body temperature well over 100, and I was trying to cool him down and prevent his heart from stopping. I wrote this on the report. This is how my report was written. Lieutenant John Doe, the OIC, arrived on scene. The inmate was bleeding from the side of his head. Once the lieutenant and other inmates arrived, the doors remained open. I briefed the lieutenant on what happened, why the doors were open, that I believed he was very high on drugs. And at that point, myself and the two other officers removed ourselves from the incident. We stepped outside, around the corner, and out of sight from the inmate to have no further involvement. End of statement. So instead of kind of talking through the story and going back and forth, and I would write this, I would write that, that's basically what I wrote. We get there, we get a call. We get a call from other officers, you know. It's not a code, they're refusing to lock down. So we go up there to go help them. I see the inmate twirling. He's twirling a mop handle like this. What he's got taped in his hand, his right hand, is a 3-pound square piece of metal, and that metal was the fan motor from one of those 15-inch oscillating fans that the inmates would have in a prison. He had that duct tape to his hand. 2 weeks prior, an inmate did the same thing and struck one of the third officers, broke his orbital bone right here, big cut on his nose, black eye. So they thought this was going to be a good pattern. Now, I can talk about this. We all went to IA the next day, Internal Affairs. They came in, remember in the other videos, first thing they did was read me my Miranda rights, asked me if I wanted an attorney, and I said no. They asked me if I would talk to them, and I said yes. They asked me what happened, and I told them just like I told you. We're 9 minutes into the tape. So about 6 minutes of me explaining what happened, they said, okay, why did you choose to hit, you punched to the side of his face and neck area? And I explained. Heavy clothes, went through this whole thing. I said, it's been my training. I've been to 2 DEA schools. I've been to a lot of use of force. They know I was an instructor in law enforcement. And I said, that level of intoxication, I'm not going to mess around when somebody says weapon with arm bars and wrist locks, you know, common peroneal strikes, radial strikes. I'm not doing that kind of stuff. I'm going straight to central nervous system. I said I was very close. They were very short jabs, like 6-inch jabs. They weren't intended to kill him, not to break his body in half, to disrupt him to the neck, to the jaw. in this area. I didn't hurt his ear, no temple, didn't break his orbital bone, didn't break his jaw. He got a cut, a boxer's cut on his eye from a punch, and he got a cut on this side because his head kept banging against the wall and then the floor on the floor. And I explained this. And they said, you chose that to disrupt nervous system. Did you do anything else? And I said, no, other than grab and try and trap his wrist, try and help get him secure underneath here, the hammer lock, while I'm striking up here. I was doing two things. Cuff got on, all of a sudden arms swinging freely. I grabbed and went straight to the arm bar and put him on the ground. I said I wanted to have control, and I did have control. I controlled that inmate on meth and bath salts because right from the get-go, I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait. There was no negotiating and debating. When he's layered in clothes and he's twirling a mop handle and he's ready to fight, I took that moment. As soon as we got inside, they buzzed the door and I had to step in to grab. We grabbed, they said weapon, I started. I controlled this. I said he's got minor injuries, they're cuts. They could put a butterfly on there, probably, maybe 2 stitches at the most. It's in the area that bleeds a lot, that's all. They asked me a couple more simple questions. I don't even remember because they were very simple. They asked me just briefly about in law enforcement, I was a certified instructor. I told them, I've been to this class. I've been taser certified in police and at the prison. None of these other tools were going to work. I went straight to that. They said, okay, we have no further questions. And I said, okay, thank you. And when we were done, they turned the tape recorder off and they looked at me and they said, from behalf of the commissioner himself, the Georgia Department of Corrections, we are told to relay a message to you, Sergeant Larson. Thank you for de-escalating this through minimal use of force, minimal violence, and protecting the officers so that nobody was hurt. The inmate ended up in the hospital in intensive care. Why? Because of the meth and the bath salts. Because his heart was racing, his body temperature was through the roof. The obvious reasons. What I did? A couple butterflies. That's it. So guys out there, police and corrections, get some training. Take the training you have and develop it. Practice it. It's not fundamental. Take the fundamentals and make them intermediate level. Take the intermediate level training with your friends and develop it, and with instructors, become advanced practitioners. I've used that word. I've testified to that word. I say I am an instructor. I've taught many things for a long time. So I tell them I'm a master instructor and I'm a master practitioner. That means I have mastered the skills of police defensive tactics, PPCT, pressure point control techniques, pain compliance. I have mastered those over 30 plus years in a career. And by doing this, I can minimize a situation. I can minimize the injury. My thought process can go from verbal hands-on taser mace, verbal hands-on baton, arm locks, wrist locks, leg sweep, common strikes. No, go back up to here, pressure point, temporomandibular joint, infraorbital, hypoglossal. You start talking and you can just spit these things out over and over and over, back and forth. No, go to the radio. You get your PR-24 out, use a running arm lock, use a wrist lock, wrist drag, put them on the ground. Arms extended, go back into the hammer lock, put the handcuffs on, fold the feet up, use a tibia nerve at the bottom of your calf muscles. When you talk and you act like that, become a master practitioner. You'll become a master at your craft, which is protecting yourself. All of your other officers in blue don't have a badge on, but this is the badge. You'll protect them, and you'll protect your family. You'll protect your income, the house that you've bought, the cars you own, from being sued. I had a discussion a few months ago with a chief deputy and a captain in the county jail that I worked at. And he said, well, and he sat back in a chair and he started rocking and going like this to me. Well, I've been in over 30 years in law enforcement and retired and working at the jail now. And the captain here, he's got over 10 years experience and this and all that. And I'm sure you've been in the hot box like we have. We've been in the hot box. We've been in the seat. We've been sued. And I said, no, sir. I started my career in the military in 1985. It's now 2000. I have not been sued for anything involving force. I've not been in the hot box. I've talked to internal affairs as a procedure to clear the situation up, to explain, or to talk as the instructor how I train somebody to do something. No, I've not been in the hot box like you guys. I'm a professional. I have trained and worked with attorneys and teaching use of force and the laws and the rights and the civil rights. You know, rights about Miranda, we've talked about that. Tennessee versus Garner, Graham versus Connor. I've worked with attorneys on these things. You know, Garrity, I just made a video and talked about Garrity v. New Jersey. I learned these things from attorneys. I just didn't pick a book up and read it. I didn't make it up. Formal training. And they looked at me and said, "We don't believe you." And I said, "Well, you take it for what it's worth. I haven't been. You can call the sheriff." I named the sheriff that I worked for. I said, "You can call down here to the jail. You can call down to the prison. I have not been sued." Yeah, they stopped. They didn't have anything to say. You can be like this too. Bring this confidence, education, and training together. Bring them all three together. Make them to one. And that one will protect you. So I hope you like this story. That night was a very wild night. You know, things did seem to be very intense. The time that we got there and they started to buzz the door and I shut it again, and the conversation then it was open and we had to go in. From that time till the lieutenant came and I stood back up was probably 2.5 minutes at the most. I mean, it was that quick. From the time of my first punch, they said, "Would it be safe to say that you gave him 20 or 30 punches?" I said, "Short jabs." My fist was closed. I'm not saying punch, I'm saying jab. Jabs are short. In boxing, jab is your lead hand. That's the short punch. It's called a jab. I said, easily, I did 30 plus jabs. Nothing is broke. A couple stitches, a butterfly, got control, and we saved his life so that he did not overdose on the meth and the bath salts. That's what we do as professionals, don't we? So I hope you like this story. This is part 4. I've kind of escalated part 1 and 2 a little bit. Part 3, I talked about tasing an inmate twice that had a weapon in his hand. Refused to give it up, and when he fell, had to tase him again. So check out part 3 and part 4. You know, these were wild at the moments when they happened, exciting. The new guys are like, "Wow, I can't believe this. I can't believe this, man. I got to see and be a part of all this." But it's, you know, it's another day and another story in a life when you have a career that's like this. So hit the like, hit the share button. Part 5, the next video, I'm going to talk to you. I was asked to review a police shooting, officer-involved shooting. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to draw a picture a little bit involving the vehicle in a parking lot where it happened. I'm going to outline this and give you the verdict, my verdict, as well as the verdict of the range officer from our department to give the other department. So stay tuned for number 5.